Once upon a time there was a small village surrounded by green hills and farms. Princess Odor resided in this small village, and her father was King Chukmeka. The ruler of the village, Odor, the king's eldest daughter, was known for her kind and gentle nature, and she treated the people as well. However, Odor faced a lifelong struggle with a significant problem. She had a strong and unpleasant body odor. Even from a very young age, Odor's odor was worse than that of other children, and as she grew older, the odor became more intense and unpleasant every time she walked. The odor lingered behind her as Princess Odor grew into a young woman. Villagers began to treat her differently. They tried to avoid her because of her offensive odor. Some villagers would make jokes and nasty comments about her stench behind her back. Mothers would quickly tuck their children indoors when they saw Odor approaching, and former friends would deliberately stay away from her. This made Odor feel deeply sad. Despite her beauty and royal status, many young men from the village and neighboring kingdoms who wished to court Odor were repelled by her odor as soon as they came within 6 feet of her. As a result, they decided not to pursue her. Odor felt extremely lonely and withdrew from leaving the palace most days. She often stayed in her room looking out the window, daydreaming of finding true love and a man who could accept her despite her unpleasant odor. However, this seemed an impossible dream, and Odor shed many tears because of her deep sense of loneliness. One hot summer day in the village, while Princess Odor was in her room in the castle fanning herself, she heard lively sounds emanating from the town square. There was merry drumming and curious laughter. Odor opened her shutters and looked outside, watching the people dance and celebrate the summer festival day. Around a bonfire, Odor felt a flash of excitement and contemplated sneaking out of the palace to observe the festivities. Unnoticed, the people seemed so absorbed in their rivalry that she thought she might go unnoticed. Silently, she left the palace and walked cautiously to the edge of the town square. For a brief moment, no one noticed she had joined them. Odor stood in the shadows, watching wistfully as girls her age danced energetically in their vibrant skirts. However, a breeze blew, carrying the unfortunate scent of Odor through the crowd. People wrinkled their noses, searching for the source of the unpleasant odor. The drumming and dancing abruptly ceased as all eyes turned to the isolated princess. Mouths opened in astonishment before contorting into grimaces of disapproval. People doubled over in disgust and whispered behind their hands as they pointed at Odor. The carefree joy that had Odor's eyes filled with tears of humiliation. Feeling utterly ashamed and embarrassed after being ridiculed while attempting to dance at a town meeting, she fled from the crowd and sought shelter behind some bushes. Desperately hoping to remain unnoticed, she crouched trembling behind a tree, praying that no one would find her. However, in the distance she heard the steady beat of a drum getting louder, and she approached fearfully. She looked through the leaves to see who was coming towards her. To her surprise, it was a cheerful young man from a neighboring village. Smiling as he played a hand drum, he walked straight towards her hiding place. When he arrived, he stopped playing and politely asked why she had stopped dancing earlier. Noting how cheerful and free he seemed as he danced, Odor was surprised that this stranger had followed her there, especially considering he could detect her distinctive scent. In disbelief, he asked, "Can you smell me, and yet you looked for me here? Everyone in my village makes fun of me and laughs at my dancing." The young man gently replied, "Don't worry about them. I think you are a wonderful dancer. Please ignore their cruel words and keep dancing happily and freely." Odor was surprised by his kind words and realized that he really didn't care about her differences. Comforted by this revelation, she decided to ignore the cruel taunts of her neighbors and dance freely as she wished. The young man began to play a happy and upbeat rhythm on his initially insecure hand drum. Odor soon began to sway gently to the rhythm of the music. The stranger's smile grew wider as he watched her and increased the tempo of his drum, playing faster. As he stared at Odor, she felt that he really saw her, not just her outward appearance but her heart and soul. For the first time, she felt completely accepted as she was. This realization freed her spirit, and she let go of her spirit and let go of her feelings. Realization freed her spirit and let go of self-consciousness. Dancing fluidly with grace and joy, the drum sped up and Odor's feet moved faster. She jumped and spun with ease, weaving quick and elaborate steps that came instinctively. The rhythm flowed through her, filling her with elation and vitality. With the stranger's admiring gaze fixed on her, she felt liberated to express her love of flying dance. When Princess Odor finally stopped dancing, she and the smiling stranger held each other's gaze. For a moment, Odor felt exhilarated by the joyful dance and uplifted by the experience of being truly seen and accepted by someone. They burst into laughter together, connecting through their shared happiness. After catching their breath, the young man introduced himself as Aeon, a resident of a nearby village who played drums for events and celebrations in the squares. Ayn asked if Princess Odor would meet him at the same place tomorrow to talk more and perhaps dance together again. His warm smile An enthusiasm made it clear he had thoroughly enjoyed their time together. Princess Odor eagerly agreed, feeling her heart fuller and lighter than it had been in years. During the weeks that followed, Princess Odor's encounters with Aeon became the highlight of her days. Every evening she would excitedly escape to her secret spot in the bushes where Aeon would already be waiting with his drums. The two new friends would delight in long animated conversations and continue to share the joy of dancing. They would engage in conversations where they would share stories and jokes, resulting in hours of laughter during these chats. Oren often took his drumsticks and played energetic rhythms that delighted Princess Odor and inspired her to dance with new freedom and joy in Ain's presence. She let go of all self-consciousness about her lingering odor problems. He made her feel so accepted that she could lose herself in the music, further enhancing their connection. As Odor passed by him, and he made her feel so accepted that she could lose herself in the music. As Odor passed by Oren, he gazed at her with admiration for her spirit, beauty, and essence. Over the course of several weeks, the initial bond developed into a deep and trusting friendship, blossoming into a warm affection felt by both parties. Princess Odor found herself falling in love with Oren, and felt his equal affection for her. However, a part of her, agitated by his love for her, was not so much a part of her as she was a part of him. Oren, a common musician and fighter, and she, a royal protégé forced into marriage by political alliances, assumed that a future together was impossible. Yet in her most private dreams, she longed for social status not to interfere, wishing that they could be united in marriage despite their different social statuses. United in marriage despite their different backgrounds, Princess Odor and Oren continued to build their connection, sitting close, talking and laughing together. One evening, as their conversation unfolded, Oren reached out and gently took both of Odor's hands in his own, her expression changing to seriousness and overflowing with emotion. Oren expressed his deep affection for her and his desire for them to be together forever. He proposed to ignore royal customs and permissions and expressed that being with Odor brought him true happiness. He longed for a life united in love, hoping that their union could bridge the gap between their peoples. Overwhelmed with surprise and joy, the Princess Odor cried tears of happiness. She had wished for nothing more than to be Aeon's wife, but assumed it could never come true. Odor felt she did not deserve such a wonderful man who was willing to overcome social barriers to declare his unconditional love for her. In her excitement, she embraced Oren, whispering a heartfelt yes against her smiling lips, sealing their love with a long and tender kiss. She had never imagined such a liberating love could be theirs. With blushing faces and radiant smiles, they made enthusiastic plans fueled by new possibilities. The lovers agreed to share the wonderful news with their families immediately. They would first seek permission to marry from Odor's parents, the king and queen, and then they would travel to the town of Oren to obtain the approval and blessing of her family. Hand in hand, filled with ecstasy, they set out on their new journey together towards a future as husband and wife. However, shortly after their engagement, a tragedy struck the town, shattering Princess Odor. A deadly and rapidly spreading plague devastated the countryside. Early symptoms included high fever and the appearance of large bubble-like blisters on the skin. Within days, those infected would succumb to violent bouts of insanity before finally succumbing to death. It was a gruesome and agonizing way to die. In a desperate attempt to contain the terrifying outbreak, the leaders of the 4 neighboring villages made the difficult decision to completely close their borders. Travel between the villages was not allowed under any circumstances. If villagers attempted to flee, they would be captured, quarantined, or even killed by fearful gods. The plague continued to rage, and week after week residents lived in fear, isolating themselves in their homes and avoiding any interaction with potentially infected individuals. Friends and neighbors would board up their doors and windows, venturing out only briefly for needed supplies before again isolating themselves by self-imposed imposition. For Princess Odor, weeks of separation from her beloved Oren turned into months of complete isolation within the palace. She felt trapped as the plague spread relentlessly around her. Her initial excitement about a future with Oren was overshadowed by daily fears for his safety, as she had no way to contact him. Villages remained frozen in quarantine for endless months, waiting for the plague to run its course. Odor and Oren could only hope and pray that the other was still alive. However, despite isolating themselves inside the royal palace, Odor eventually fell ill. She woke up one day with a fever and the terrifying red pimples spreading up her arms. The plague had caught up with her. In the days that followed, her condition worsened and she experienced severe fevers, leaving her weak and unable to even lift her head to take a sip of water. The king and queen, witnessing their eldest daughter's suffering, tried every traditional remedy and modern medicine available, but nothing seemed to help. In a desperate attempt, the queen recalled an obscure tonic that an old woman in a village had once prepared when Odor was a child. Despite its repulsive ingredients, they administered the mixture to Odor and, miraculously, a day later she showed signs of improvement. With constant care and the strange medicine, Odor slowly recovered from the brink of death. Although still frail, she had survived the disease that had claimed many lives. Her parents were ecstatic and shed tears of gratitude when her fever finally subsided. After several more days of rest and recuperation, Odor felt strong enough to rise from her sick bed. Looking at herself in the full-length mirror, she was shocked by her reflection. The prolonged fever had transformed her appearance. Her skin looked fresher and smoother than ever, and, to her amazement, the chronic body odor that had plagued her since childhood had completely disappeared. Overwhelmed with happiness, Odor laughed ecstatically and spun around, reveling in her newfound confidence and the delicious scent of her own skin. Eager to share the glorious news with her parents, Odor ran to them, unable to contain her excitement. She wanted them all to know that the infection that had nearly cost her life had instead brought about a remarkable transformation. After many more months, the plague began to subside and the strict quarantines were lifted. As Princess Odor walked through the castle gate for the first time in over a year, she nervously held her breath. However, to her surprise, no one retreated or insulted her. Instead, the villagers paused their activities and admired her graceful presence. Odor could not believe her eyes and ears as praise was uttered toward her, replacing the earlier contempt she had experienced. Note: I have made some modifications to the text to improve clarity and readability while retaining the essence of the original story. In radiant health, some even approached cautiously, their wide eyes taking in her beauty, becoming captivated in her presence. The local youths in particular seemed unable to stop boldly watching the princess' every move, their mouths half open in affection. For the first time that she could remember, Odor was moving about her kingdom feeling strong, confident and truly accepted. It seemed that over the course of the horrors of the plague, her healed scent and newfound confidence had transformed her into a village beauty that no one could ignore. Princess Odor was giddy with the thrill of acceptance and the admiration of the villagers she used to hide from. Wrapped up in self-pride over her cured scent and newfound beauty, she had almost forgotten her loyal love Odor, but walking through the town, she saw a familiar figure anxiously approaching down the road towards her. It was Odor, her dear friend, companion and boyfriend, whom she had not seen in over a year since the plague struck. Odor's first anxious impulse was to run straight into his arms with tears of relief for his safety, but she restrained herself, suddenly hesitating. Surely she was now too far above someone of common status like Odor. She was a royal spoiled brat, and he a drummer boy with no notable wealth or family name to elevate him. Thoughts turning to insecurity, the princess composed her face into a formal and aloof mask before Ayn could reach her. When she did, the drummer boy was grinning on the verge of bursting, desperate joy shining through as he cried, "My princess, how I have missed basking in your beauty and radiance." He moved toward her as if expecting a warm embrace, but Odor remained reserved and still, unmoving to welcome him after their long separation. Odor joyfully moved forward to embrace Princess Odor, so grateful to see his beloved again after agonizing months apart, but the princess abruptly pulled away from his open arms. A look of deep surprise and horror crossed Odor's face at her rejection. Confused, he searched her now cold eyes, wondering in sharp, cutting tones, not unlike her warm voice of old. Odor stated that she no longer wished to continue their relationship. She told him that after enduring the terrors of the plague and emerging more beautiful than ever, she now moved into higher and different social realms than a common boy like Odor ever could. Odor seemed deeply hurt by Aiden's harsh words, his anguish evident on his face. "But Odor, I love you," he protested passionately. "These months of silence only made me love you more. I would do anything to make you my wife." Princess Odor met his gaze with a burning look. "You will address me as Princess Odor," he ordered coldly. "This conversation ends here. I deserve better than you," she spat the words, feeling a cruel satisfaction in them. Then, without a backward glance or a pause to listen to her disconsolate pleas, he strode quickly away, walking purposefully. She blocked out her own anguish, shutting out the pain she felt inside. In Odor's mind, she severed their connection so abruptly, closing that chapter of her life forever. She now had many noble suitors vying for her attention in the coming months. The increasingly vain princess continued with life at court as if the lowly drummer boy Oren had never touched her heart. She entertained extravagant marriage proposals from respected lords and princes, one after another. These influential men, who had once turned away from Odor in disgust, now showered her shamelessly with compliments, eager for the newly transformed princess's attention. Odor smiled as she absorbed their compliments on her flawless skin, graceful movements and regal bearing, compliments she could never have imagined receiving before. Despite the adoration, she couldn't shake the regret, knowing in her heart that she had rejected Oren so harshly. As the weeks passed, King Chukua urged Princess Odor to quickly choose a husband from among the numerous suitors vying for her hand before rumors damaged her reputation. With her marriage prospects in mind and wanting all eyes on her, Odor declared that she would organize a wrestling tournament where the strongest men in the kingdom would compete for the chance to marry her. Upon hearing this, men of great strength traveled from far and wide, eager for the chance to win the hand of the renowned beauty. In the days leading up to the tournament, Odor became obsessed with improving her appearance to outshine everyone. Her maid groomed her meticulously, but in her quest for external perfection, Odor neglected basic cleanliness, even neglecting to bathe regularly. Slowly but surely, her old body odor returned. On the morning of the wrestling tournament, the weather was perfect, providing an ideal backdrop to showcase Princess Odor's beauty. She entered the bustling arena bedecked in shimmering silks and adorned with jewels, intent on dazzling the crowd. But when Odon raised her delicate hand to wave to the cheering crowd, her enthusiasm suddenly changed. A startled whisper quickly spread through the crowd and they turned away in disgust, wrinkling their noses at the strong odor coming from the princess. The embarrassed men hid their faces, looking away to avoid eye contact. Princess Odor was deeply embarrassed as the tournament participants shook their heads and walked away, wanting to avoid her. The villagers watching the tournament also left, talking quietly about their body odor and holding their noses in disgust. Odor felt completely crushed and embarrassed. She quickly removed her clothes and elegant royal jewelry, dropping them on the ground with tears in her eyes. She turned and ran as fast as she could. As Odor ran, her eyes fell on a person standing alone on the other side of the tournament grounds. Prince Orenza. He stood tall and straight, looking at her kindly as he hurried away. After a moment, Orenza walked purposefully towards her, his face showing both concern and sadness at her distress. When Orenza reached Odor, he spoke gently to her. "My dear and precious one, how could you think so little of our love and what we meant to each other? Why would you give up our bond for the fleeting attention of others?" Tears rolled down Odor's cheeks as she shook her head. "Please forgive me, Orenza. I made a terrible mistake in thinking that looking beautiful on the outside was more important than our love. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.